Our biggest problem as a company right now is we cannot act like an internet company. Open a new market, we have to have a partnership with a local bank. We have to pay attention to different regulatory onboarding environments. And a digital currency like Bitcoin takes a bunch of that away, where we can potentially launch a product in every single market around the world, because they're all using the same currency.
Welcome to Stocks Daily, the channel where we invest smart so the billionaires can work for us. In this video, we're going to talk about the future catalysts that will drive Square stock, and I'm going to cover in detail the financials. I'm going to give a technical analysis and give a detailed 2025 price target. So let's get right into it. So what I love about Square is that they're addressing significant market opportunities, and they're thinking outside the box, and they're taking risks. Like you heard Jack Dorsey say, CEO of Square, in an interview with Lex Friedman from April this year, linked to the full interview is in the description below. Square wants to break away from the regulatory restrictions and launch their own products in every market in the world without being tied down to local banks. You see, Square is a company that's growing like an octopus. It's expanding its tentacles, grabbing market share, and with there being so many different kinds of fish in the sea, wouldn't you prefer to be an octopus? So what I mean by this is they have a lot of fingers in a lot of different pies. Obviously, Square should be seen as a fintech company. It has its financial services, mainly their merchant services, which is basically a one-stop shop for all merchant needs, but mobile payment services and their Cash App alone could be an independent parabolic company. These products serve so many needs, and anyone with an internet connection could soon have access to these services, which were restricted to them before in one way or another. Not everyone can buy stocks and not everyone can buy crypto, but the Cash App will allow them to do that. You may not know this, but in 2014, Square acquired Caviar, a delivery service called Caviar. It was a delivery service, but Square turned it into a tech company, much more than a delivery service. With Square processing payments, tracking table locations, electronic menus, electronic tip splitting, and Square eventually sold the Caviar app to DoorDash that just IPO'd 2 weeks ago. But you can see that it's clear that they're willing to take risks and try new things and innovate. Jack Dorsey has ambitions to build Square into a much bigger company made of diverse standalone companies that complement each other. Square Seller Services already operates independently from Cash App, and in recent news, Jack Dorsey's been seen hanging out with Jay-Z and Beyonce twice, and potentially in talks with the couple to purchase their music streaming service Tidal. At this stage, it's not a done deal, but it's clear that Square has plans to integrate more services into their ecosystem. And another very interesting addition to Square's corporate umbrella is Square's $50 million purchase of Credit Karma's tax business, which will beef up the services available on the Cash App. The feature will allow users to have access to free-to-use tax filing services, which will supplement the Cash App as a whole and bring more utility to the table. Also, the recent parabolic uptrend in Bitcoin is definitely going to give Square an amazing Q4. As Square purchased $50 million worth of Bitcoin, roughly 1% of their total assets as of Q2 2020, and the price of Bitcoin has literally just doubled since then, and it's currently at all-time highs. All right, so it's clear the company has a good outlook and a management team that wants to expand and has a track record for delivering. Fundamentals look amazing with 40% compound annual growth rate in the past 5 years. So Dorsey's obviously been executing. So if we take a look at the financials, we see great increases in revenue year on year. As you can see here, every year the revenue's almost 30%, 50% up. Total gross profits after costs look amazing. And the gross profits exceed the 40% annual growth rate expected. It's been a phenomenal year so far in the 3 quarters that we've seen the financials for. And that's phenomenal considering that the merchant side of the business slumped due to the coronavirus shutdowns of small and medium businesses, which is really impressive. But you can see in the transactional based revenue, a slight slump in the profits, but that's the revenue, but that's to be expected because obviously small, medium businesses where they get their transactional based revenue from. And all of that was closed during coronavirus. But you could see a nice growth in Q3. To be honest, it's surprising because you got so many shutdowns and lockdowns across the world. And but what's really been driving the revenue is the Bitcoin. Insane Bitcoin revenue. So if you have a look at the Bitcoin revenue, absolutely phenomenal. Almost a 2x in one quarter. In Q3, their Bitcoin revenue was basically as much as all of the Bitcoin revenue in 2018 and 2019 combined. It actually exceeds that. So fantastic Bitcoin revenue. So as we can see here, the Cash App revenue is up phenomenally year on year, and even quarter by quarter, massive increases in the Cash App revenue. Cash App profit is up very nicely. In one quarter alone, they're up 100 million in profit. Cash App monthly active users year on year is insane increases. So we're talking about a 40% increases in monthly active users, and Cash App downloads are up insanely. Obviously, this is not going to last forever, but it's still phenomenal growth. Bitcoin revenue is just absolutely insane. And this is Q2. Q3 was better than Q2, and Q4, which hasn't come out yet, is going to be absolutely insane because the Bitcoin prices have just ballooned. And obviously, Cash App card owners doubled in the last year. Annual revenue up. Everything's looking great. So let's have a look at the graphs and see where we can get in on the action. All right. So as you can see here, Square's up insane. Absolutely crazy. So if we look at the 1 week chart, that's not something that a lot of people would want to invest in up here at the top. It's quite a scary chart if you're new into the company. If you're invested in the company, you're loving it. But if you're new, up here, starting your position up here is terrifying. However, let's have a look at how much it's gone up as a percentage. Let me get my measuring stick out. So you can see the percentage increase here in the bottom left. So since the Roni lows, the price is up. As of previous close, the price is up 550%, and the peak it was up almost 600% since the Roni low. That's terrifying. No one wants to buy at ridiculous all-time highs. However, if we have a look at what it was pre-Roni as of until previous close, we're talking about 160% increase, and up to the all-time high, we're talking about 180%. That's more easy to stomach for a company that has such insane revenue growth, user growth, just absolutely insane growth all over across the board. I think 180% is reasonable. Obviously, it's still phenomenally high, but like compared to something like Tesla, it's slightly more reasonable. And Square does have a roughly 350 PE ratio. Tesla has about 1,000 PE ratio. So, I mean, it's not out of the scope of imagination to see it going up further. But let's be honest, trying to technically analyze a stock like this is somewhat futile, as not only because any catalyst could make the stock shoot up, but it's literally gone up in a straight line. So there's no historical data to go on, nothing really to go on. So, but there are a few interesting things that we can see with this graph. Look, I always say don't try and time the market, especially with a stock like this, because my long-term thesis on this is highly bullish. Square currently has $102 billion market cap. I can easily see this going up to 300 billion by 2025. So your entry point is just a small difference. But that being said, no one wants to buy a stock and watch it drop. I don't want to buy a stock up here, then see it go down there, and then obviously I could have bought it down there. No one wants to see that. Although if I did do that, I'll just dollar cost my way in and then hold it until it shoots back up. So that's not a big problem if you did buy it up here. But obviously you'd want to buy it for psychological reasons at the lowest point. Now, like I said, a chart like this, traditional technical analysis has little utility. However, However, there's some psychological barriers here. So as you can see here, 150 was previously a resistance. That when it broke that 150 resistance, it tested it multiple times, tested it here, tested it here, tested it here. When it finally broke 150 became a support, bounced back off it. Same thing happened with 170. 170 was a resistance here, was a resistance here, but then it became a support, it bounced back off it. Again, same thing with 200. Resistance here, broke it, became a support, bounced off it. Same thing with 220. Now, with 220, it was a previous resistance. Look, tested it, 1 test, 2 tests, 3 tests, and then after the 3rd test, it bounced off it. Now, I can see 220 being the next support level. So we tested 140. So we tested 240. We weren't able to break that. I strongly see 240 as the current resistance. So once we do break 240, I see it shooting upwards. Obviously, I say this, but we need good catalysts. And I think the increase in Bitcoin prices and the Q4 results that are going to come out are going to be phenomenal. I think when the Q4 results come out, they're going to hit all expectations and hit all of Wall Street's estimates. So I think when the Q4 results come out, we're going to see 250, 260 maybe. But currently, from a technical point of view, 240 is the resistance. I do see 220 as the support. So let's go into a more narrow outlook. So it's testing the 225 sort of region right now. So 225 roughly here. So as you can see, 225, again, psychological barrier. See, these whole numbers are very important. These 225s, your 220s, your 200s. It was a resistance before, and then now it turned into a support. However, I do see it breaking that back down and going down to 240 potentially. It has if there's no good news catalyst coming out in the next few weeks until Q4 releases, I do see it retesting 220. Now, before we get into where I see the stock going, I just want to say that I'm very bullish on Square. I've been buying heavily throughout. My first entry point was around 46. And I bought throughout these parabolic movements. And I think we're probably never going to see the sub 170 region again. However, like I said, it is possible that we'll see 220. And if there's some horrible news, I'm not saying it's not in the realm of possibilities that we will see 200 again. So if I was to get my measuring stick out, so from the highs until 220, we're talking about a 17% drop. That's very possible. And from where we are now until 200 is about 12% drop. Obviously, very possible. Depends on a lot of things, the pandemic and the whole Biden election and everything, and the stimulus check. So I can see 200 getting tested. And if there's very, very bad news, maybe we might see 170 again, but that's very unlikely. Very, very unlikely. I don't see us going down to 170, and under 170, never again. That's gone. Unless the company goes bankrupt or something. But like we said, their financials are looking amazing. Oh, one thing I didn't mention with the financials, they have no debt. The company has no debt. They got cash on hand. Bankruptcy is not an option. So in terms of if I was trying to get into the stock today, I would probably start dollar cost averaging my way in around 220. I would probably start buying around 220, maybe 225. So 225, I'll open a very small position, a little taster position. Around 200, I'll start buying in a bit more heavy. And if it does drop below 200, I will set some very heavy buy orders for between 200 and 205. So I think if it does hit 200, it won't stay there for very long. I see a lot of people buying in around 200. So it may hit it pre-market or after hours. So if that's the case, I'll probably put in some buy orders in around 202, 205. and try and pick up some shares there. So I would try and dollar cost average my way in from around 225 down to about 200. But if you're looking to invest now, bear in mind that all this good news is priced in. The next 12 months growth is all priced in, and Wall Street expects growth. What we need as investors is for the company to continue this growth trajectory for another 5 to 10 years to see monster gains. I can easily see this company 3xing, 5xing to a $500 billion market cap by 2025. However, one missed earnings estimate or a slump in user growth may tank the stock price temporarily. And for me, that just means more buying opportunities. So let's have a look at my Square stock price estimates for 2025 and the next few years. So in the green, we have the actual revenue numbers from Square based on their investor relations. We have obviously from 2015 to 2019, and we have Q1, Q2, and Q3 of 2020. The Q4 are my estimates. I think these estimates are very, very low. They're based on the previous 5 years average growth, which obviously the previous performance is not indicative of future performance. But just for the sake of this analysis, for simplification, I've gone with the average increase of the previous years into the Q4 results, and the actual Q1, 2, and 3 results plus my estimated Q4 results is amounts to the 2020 results we have here, which is obviously three quarters right and one quarter estimate. Now I think these estimates are not accurate because I expect much better Bitcoin revenue and potentially lower transaction-based revenue, because obviously you have the minus 10% here. That was because of the Roni shutdowns. But I expect maybe lower transactional revenue, maybe higher subscription-based revenue due to the expanding user growth and the more facilities available on the Cash App. But I definitely think the Bitcoin revenue should be around between 130 150% increase in Q4 alone. Now, as you can see here, it's insane number. This is the Bitcoin revenue increase from 2019 up to 2020. So these are not my numbers. These are Square's numbers. Insane increase. And I think it's going to do better than that, because obviously Bitcoin right now is the price is ballooning. So I expect maybe potentially better than that. But I've gone with quite of a bearish target here for Q4. It's probably best to these analysis is probably, as an investor's point of view, it's better to take the numbers on a low end, and when the numbers do come out, hopefully we will be positively surprised. So I've gone with a 45% increase over the year on year for the next couple of years, the next 5 years, for example Bitcoin, which amounts to 192% average growth based on the last few in the growth of the next few years. Now I think this is quite low, because Bitcoin's obviously grown in 1 year. It's grown 928%. So I do see it growing more than that, but we can play around with the numbers in a minute. Now, the way I've calculated the earnings, and which is ultimately calculating the future stock price, I've got the margins here. So we got the 2025 earnings based on my estimated growth, and then we have the cost margins. Now, here's where it gets a bit iffy. The cost margins are based on 2019. So obviously the cost margins and the operating expenses are not going to be the same in 2025. We would hope that they get better. It's the very good chance that they get better. Not everything, but some things. I'm really hoping that the Bitcoin revenue margin gets better, because they're literally only making 2% on Bitcoin. So this insane revenue with the 98% margin, their profit is only 680 million. With this, even though they're making 34 billion in revenue, with that margin, 680 million. So I'm hoping that the margins get better. So I'm going with 2019 margins. This is Square's actual margins. Operating expenses, again, 2019 operating expenses. So if you punch in the 2025, my 2025 price targets and use the 2019 cost margins, you're left with a net profit of about 5 billion, just over 5 billion. After taxes, you're left with just under 5 billion. Now, if you work out the EPS, you've got roughly a 10.7 EPS, which I think is quite a little bit high, and based on the outstanding shares. But if we, like, for example, reduce the subscription-based revenue, our expectation for subscription-based revenue, let's say 50%. So in these 5 years, the subscription-based revenue grew by 107%. These are actual results. I'm saying that it will grow only 52% in the next 5 years. I think that's quite bearish. But if we will test those numbers out, that gives us an EPS of 8.2. An EPS close to probably 7 is more likely. That's probably what, like, the stock market would want. So let's go with like a 20% increase in the transactional based revenue, 50% for subscription. Hardware, I don't see hardware growing that much, especially with the whole Roni situation, small medium business dying off. So let's say hardware 10%, Bitcoin 45. I think that's a bit low, but we get an EPS around $8. So based on this EPS, I've got two price targets here. I got my 2025 bullish price target, which is a 5x. So remember, the current price of Square is 228. And the PE ratio is 500, which is obviously, that's not going to last forever. That's absolutely insane. That will obviously come back down to earth. And the current market cap is 102 billion. So my 5x price target, my bullish price target, is $1,200 a stock. With these earnings, based on my 2025 earnings, that would give us a 148 PE ratio, which is I think reasonable for a tech company, considering that right now it's at 500. I think that's quite reasonable, and that would give us a $540 billion market cap. My bearish price target is a 2x from now. It gives us a 70 PE ratio, and that's based on these growths here. Now let's play with the numbers. Let's just say that Bitcoin grows 60% every year. So we've got a 205% increase over the next 5 years. That then reduces the PE ratios down to 144 and 68. I think the market would probably want 100 PE ratio. In the next 5 years, I think that's very reasonable. For 100 PE ratio, let's see, maybe 1,000. So 120. Let's increase maybe some of the growth estimates. So based on the last 5 years, we had a 31% increase in transactional based revenue. Let's just say it's 25%. It's reasonable. Subscription base was 107. Let's say it grows by 60%. And hardware, 65% growth. Let's say 15%. And we'll leave Bitcoin at 60. Then the PE ratio here is starting to look a bit more reasonable. So we're talking about $1,000 stock price. That's just under a 5x from where we are today. 91 PE ratio. Let's test 1,100, 100 on the dot. So if we get these sort of growth numbers, these average growth for the next 5 years, 1,100 price target with a 100 PE ratio, which is basically a $500 billion market cap, I think that's very easily attainable. And the bearish price, 52 PE ratio, I think that's easy. Definitely we're going to hit this price target 100% with this sort of growth. Now let's just for playing around sake, let's just say Bitcoin revenue goes up 200%. It's such a big number that this doesn't even fit in the square. So let's say they make 1.3, almost $1.3 trillion in 2025 from Bitcoin revenue. So bear in mind, this is not insane, because look, 321% increase in this 5 years. We already increased 900% from 2019 to 2020. So it's not super unreasonable to think that it won't grow 200% a year. So with that in mind, if we do hit a 200% year-on-year increase in the price of Bitcoin revenue, we would then have a 45 PE ratio in our bullish case and a 23 PE ratio in our bearish case. So that would basically be, say, even if the stock price would hit 1,300, it would still be under 54 PE. If we hit maybe 1,800 stock price, we'd still have a 75 PE ratio. So if it all depends on Bitcoin. See, this is the big gamble, is the Bitcoin revenue. That's what's really gonna either really push the price up or not push the price up. See, that's what makes it so the earnings, the revenue makes the revenue so volatile. But let's come back down to earth and say 55%. So with 55% Bitcoin increase year on year, we're talking about a $1,800 price target would only have 165 PE ratio. That's, again, I don't see that as impossible. It is in the realms of reality. But that's obviously if we don't have any major negative catalysts. So I do think that these prices are possible. So around 1,100, I would say, is reasonable. Considering we're at 228 today, so that means if you did buy Bitcoin at 228, which is basically the all-time high, you kept it for 5 years, we're talking about a 5x increase. I think that's a fantastic investment. Now, it all sounds amazing. It looks like it's basically free money. You put your money in no matter what price you buy it at, hold it for 5 years and it's going to go up. Yeah, that is probably reasonable to assume that. However, this is my problem. This is my major problem with Square. So on the left here, we have the revenue segments from 2019. I should be 2019. So 2019. This is their actual revenue from the different segments from 2019. So as you can see, 65% of their revenue was from transactions, and only 11% of their revenue was from Bitcoin. Now, my big worry is that, based on my estimates, 2025, 65% of the revenue will be from Bitcoin. And if let's say, for example, we change this to 200%, so we're getting 200% year on year. That's 98% of the revenue will be from Bitcoin. This company will be so heavily Bitcoin reliant that it's just insane. It's just so volatile. It's ridiculous. Even if we go 50%, it's still over 50%. Let's say the most ultimate bearish case, we got 40%. We're still talking about 50% of the revenues from 2025. Now, I think this is my major worry with Square. This is the biggest worry for me. Is, okay, what happens if the Bitcoin, for example, crashes, or if some sort of regulation comes from the government to control Bitcoin? So this is my major worry. This is something that we definitely have to consider when we're thinking about the future of Square. However, I do see, obviously, the company innovating a lot. I'm hoping that subscription-based revenue will grow more than that. So, for example, let's say it grows by 100% year on year. Then subscription-based revenue would probably be the big winner. And let's say Bitcoin 55%. So we're talking about 50-50, nothing from hardware, and obviously you're making a loss, and probably not a lot from transactional-based revenue. So I'm hoping this is the sort of growth that we're going to see, but 100% increase in revenue from subscription-based services every year. I think that's a bit It's a bit of a push. Let's just put it that way. But if you did see these sort of growth numbers, the PE ratio would look amazing. We're talking about a 40 PE ratio. Then we could start thinking about maybe a $2,000 price target. Maybe even more than that. We're talking about but I don't see the company being a $1 trillion market cap by 2025. I would love for that to happen, but it's unrealistic. All right, to sum it all up, I think that, let's just say we get a 60% increase in subscription-based revenue, 60% from Bitcoin, and we'll leave the rest as is. I reckon a $1,200 price target, well, let's just call it 1,150. I think that's quite reasonable. $500 billion market cap. And in a bearish scenario, probably 550. So we're talking about a 50 PE there, and let's just have a look at this. There we go. So around 1,100 and 550. I think that's very reasonable if these sort of numbers are achieved. Obviously, if they exceed these numbers, which is completely possible, or if the margins increase in a positive way, then obviously the PE ratio would be even less, and these numbers could even be higher. But at a 228 price target, I very much see a 2x increase by 2025 being 100% possible. So to sum up, Square has a fantastic future with a lot of growth ahead of it. My main concern is with the Bitcoin revenue, and I'm worried that I'll balloon other types of revenue. And obviously, Bitcoin is still volatile and has low margins for the company. However, innovations and updates to the Cash App and other types of companies that they may acquire will allow other sources of revenue, like the tax filing update and the ability to buy stocks. And there's probably a lot more in the pipelines. And the Bitcoin hype will probably grow the user base. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please consider leaving a like if you got some value out of the video, and subscribe if you want to see more. And if you're still watching, then you're awesome.